But the good thing is that the Dow's over 50,000, Colin. I don't know if you know that, but I'm sure everyone is making that same joke. It is February 15th. Happy post Valentine's Day to all the lovers of Over the Loudspeaker and Hayward Herald out there who are tuning in to this February episode. Colin, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. I'm glad it just started raining like minutes ago, so I'm excited about that. They've been threatening me with a good time all day.
Are you a big stay at home in the rain kind of guy, or it's like?
I mean, I do like the sound of the rain, and it clears out the air because it's been kind of hazy recently. Yeah. So it'll be nice. It'll be nice.
Get those small particulate matters out of our breathing area
and into the groundwater where it belongs.
Exactly. Yeah. Into the ocean, into the bay where
that's right.
All the rest of the chemicals. Welcome everyone to the tamest part of the internet. If you've been on the internet for the past 2 weeks, it's been a hellhole. But the good thing is that the Dow's over 50,000, Colin. I don't know if you know that, but I'm sure everyone is making that same joke on every other podcast. But I had to squeeze it in somehow.
I mean, good thing for us that we're all benefiting from this so much, since the economy, what is it? I think is over 70% of our GDP is being fueled by the AI bubble right now. So everyone's doing great, I'm sure.
This is the not only the tamest part of the internet, it's also the only place where you can get Hayward news. Yeah, I said it. The only place you can get Hayward news.
Ooh. Wow, shots fired.
That's it. That's all I'm saying. It's factual, I think.
Okay.
Colin, do we
want to jump into the headlines?
Yeah, let's jump into the headlines.
Okay. Here we go. I'm Collin Thormoto from the Hayward Herald with your local news headlines. We're doing the February headlines, so we're looking back to January. We're going to start off with new taxes and fees coming from the school district and the city of Hayward. In an effort to balance their budgets, both the city of Hayward and HUSD are exploring new taxes and fees. The city is considering ideas like overhauling the business license tax, which hasn't been updated since the 70s, a first responder fee, which would charge insurance providers for paramedic care from the fire department, and a mellow roos tax, which is a kind of parcel tax used to pay for city services. At the same time, HUSD is also set to bring a parcel tax to voters to help bolster their revenue. All of the taxes would have to be approved by voters. However, initial polling from HUSD hints at a difficult road for these taxes, given the 2/3 majority threshold needed to pass. The taxes that garnered the most support in HUSD polling would only raise up to $7 million per year over 12 years, while the district is also expected to lose $1 million per year due to declining enrollment. And speaking of which, more cuts are coming to HUSD. After closing a $50 million budget shortfall last year, HUSD is looking to close an additional $12 to $20 million gap this year in the face of expiring one-time funding and increasing costs. The solutions identified include closing Faith Ringgold School of Arts and Science, cutting family engagement specialist hours or eliminating them entirely for 13 other schools, and reducing library services at all middle schools to half-time. School board trustees were split, however, on maintaining an accountability director who is tasked with overseeing school principals and ensuring district policies are implemented at school sites. Trustee Austin Bruckner-Carrillo was the most vocal opponent, characterizing it as administrative bloat, while Trustee April Okenda was vocally supportive of the position, which was put forward by Superintendent Chen Wu Fernandez. Accessory commercial units have divided the City Council. The Hayward City Council was divided on a new proposal to allow accessory commercial units, or ACUs, in certain parts of the city. ACUs are small commercial units attached to single-family homes, similar to accessory dwelling units or granny units. Staff has initially placed strict limits on the locations of the ACUs and what businesses are acceptable, specifically barring restaurants. Council members George Syrup and Ray Bonilla encouraged the inclusion of takeout restaurants so long as all licensing is followed, calling for commercial units for all income levels. However, the rest of the city council worried about the impact on existing businesses, saying that unlicensed street vendors may move into ACUs and exacerbate the issues they're already allegedly causing for brick and mortar restaurants. If you'd like to learn more about these headlines and support what we do, please subscribe at haywardherald.org. The Hayward Herald is your only source of independent Hayward news delivered to your inbox at least twice a week. Please subscribe and share our stories with your friends, family, and neighbors. The ticker's back. I miss it every month.
Yeah, it's a companion of the podcast. It's almost like a third character here.
Ticky, our ticker.
Yeah. We need to create a mascot that's just going to be the ticker with eyes. Thanks, Collin. Should we jump right into exploring some of those headlines a little bit deeper? I was thinking starting off with the cuts at the Hayward School District.
Oh, yeah.
Looking at the plans to cut, what was it, $7 million from the district's budget, and maybe 20 million funding gap. Is that correct?
Yeah. So the issue is that they were supposed to identify $50 million in cuts, and they didn't quite make it last time because they had a lot of one-time funding that they were relying on, some grants and other things that they knew were going to expire, but they could let those services hobble along for a little longer. The problem is that money is expiring at the end of this fiscal year. So there's still an additional, not only do they have some other cuts that they didn't finish last time, but also they have to cut an extra $7 million or something in I think it's $5 to $7 million in single one-time money that is expiring. So there's a lot of cutting still needing to be done.
And one thing that I was looking at as I was reading your article, and the impact it'll have on the district, cutting contracts for services, reducing the supplies and services for the schools, closing Faith Ringgold School of Arts, which is a magnet school. I don't know. One question I had, Collin, is how does one become a magnet school? Is this a self-designation, or is it bestowed upon you by the state of California?
I mean, I think it's just a function of how it operates.
Yeah.
I know it's a thing. I listened to a multi-part podcast about schools in New York, and they have a very different situation to ours. But the idea of magnet schools is something they talked about a lot, which is basically instead of having, a geographic area that all the kids in that area go to that school, like your typical high school or elementary school or middle school. Instead, anyone can go to that school so long as they like that particular program. So the idea with Faith Ringgold was it was supposed to have a particular program that is obviously inclusive of the sort of STEAM idea of science, technology, engineering, arts, and math. But unfortunately, the superintendent revealed that program never actually got implemented like it was supposed to last year. So basically, there are people from all over the district that are going to that one school to try and access a specific curriculum that may or may not actually be implemented, but they are growing their enrollment, but they still have, I think, only 200 something students there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I guess that sort of answers my question in terms of how does, the sort of designation of a magnet school, whether it's something that is based off the curriculum or it's designated somehow. But, when I was looking, I don't know how accurate these statistics are, but I was looking at just some of the, I guess, demographic data of the school. And I guess you can tell me if this sounds right, because I'm not familiar with Faith Ringgold at all. But it says that at least 93% of the families that attend, or the children, I guess, that attend, come from low-income families. Does that sound about right? That number seemed kind of, I don't know. I couldn't tell you if that's accurate or isn't accurate. I guess I just have no idea.
I mean, not knowing where you got that information from, I can't say. I'm not an expert on Faith Ringgold, but I
Yeah.
will say it doesn't surprise me because I know
Right.
there are a lot of schools in Hayward Unified that are what are called Title I schools, where
Mhm.
a large population of the students are low income. They are eligible for free or reduced lunch programs, all of those
Yeah.
things, because Hayward's not a super rich city as far as the
Right.
population's concerned for the most part. And so, yeah, I know a lot of them are Title One, not all of them, but I know a lot
Yeah.
of them
Yeah, I guess I was, I'm just doing a quick Google to see if I can figure out whether it's a Title One school, but yeah, we'll have to put that in the show notes afterwards. But yeah, I just, this was just kind of off a quick research thing, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, and I saw that, of course, residents came out, sort of spoke out against the cuts and the closure of the school. Is there any, I guess with all things budget wise, whether it's the city or the school district, is this inevitable? Or was this inevitable? Were there other ways to sort of manage the costs that I get? You mentioned the one time. What was it? The one time funding that they had. So I guess it's hard to kind of plan when you have that sort of funding as well.
Yeah, I mean, with Faith Ringgold, I'm not certain they relied too heavily on one-time funding. From looking at this spreadsheet that the school district put out, and the link is in the article. They're only expecting to save around $462,000 for closing the school, which is not a huge amount. Like, for comparison, they are reducing site teachers 3 FTE, and that saves $360,000. So by comparison, that's not necessarily a huge amount of money. But I know that was something at the most recent board meeting, I believe, which I haven't written up on yet because it was a big one. Trustee Austin Bruckner Carrillo had made allegations, or clearly felt that the board was not, or that the school district was not exploring enough other options. It was basically just presented as, we are closing it, and that was kind of it. There were not a lot of discussions about why or what alternatives there might be. I know they have a really short timeline to approve these. They have to get everything, whatever budget changes they're going to approve, by March 15th. Apparently, they have a county deadline, I think. But the short answer is that I don't know what else could have been done. I'm sure there was something. I know the principal spoke out and was really adamant that they were asked to increase enrollment. She had increased enrollment close to, I think it was, might have even been doubled enrollment over the course of a year, which is pretty big. I mean, you're still talking small numbers, like, again, adding 100 students, whereas like Burbank Elementary, for example, which is nearby where I live, is, I think it has 600 or 700 students there. But doubling enrollment is pretty good.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I think that's the feeling that probably a lot of parents are feeling right now, is that there at least wasn't any indication of exploring other options.
Yeah, I do remember from your article the trustees mentioning that something about the three accountability directors that may constitute some administrative bloat, that there, could be some fat trimmed off there.
Yeah, that was something that at least trustees Austin Bruckner Carrillo, potentially trustee Ken Rodden, and trustee Sarah Prada identified as things that they're not 100% certain about. The important thing to remember is there were originally 3. They've recently only had right now they're only trying to have 2, and for the last few years there haven't been any. The role of that job, from what I understand, is supposed to be basically providing an interface between the school district, like the district office, and the individual school sites, to make sure that policy is actually being implemented. There have been, according to the superintendent, there have been allegations or from parents that the principals at their school sites have not necessarily been following the policies the way they should be. And the problem is that there isn't anybody whose job it is to supervise the the principals at these individual sites. I've heard from other parents or from other teachers who have worked at other school districts that the principals in Hayward Unified Schools have what they characterized as an unusual amount of independence. And so that is something that this is maybe hoping to address. The superintendent seems to think this is really necessary. One of the positions is being offered to be paid for by the Board of Education or by the County Board of Education. So that'll be, there are two positions opening, but only one of them the district actually has to pay for. I know one of the concerns Trustee Buckner-Carrillo brought up was that the pay maybe wasn't sufficient, considering the way he said it was that the position pays less than the principals they're supposed to supervise, which is always kind of a bad look. But he has mostly returned to the argument that there are other places this money could be better spent.
Yeah, and I'm sure there are other ways to manage the interface between schools and the district that don't involve sort of an administrator, right? Having to make sure that the school is following what they're supposed to, or, that seems, at least you would think that's pretty straightforward, is that there could be a way to oversee that and have that accountability. Well, but what do I know? I actually, literally, what do I know? I know nothing, especially about this.
The one thing I'll say a lot of the times is that the closer I look at it, the more complicated things wind up being. Whether that's the way it has to be, or just the way it happens to be, I don't know. But things do seem to be always way more complicated than you expect.
Right. And so, what clearly there's probably some key positions that would have a severe impact on students from these cuts.
Oh yeah.
Are there any that stand out to you from just hearing in the meeting?
The ones that I think are really not all of them are in this list, but some of them are listed in the subsequent meeting that I'll be writing up soon. The ones that are getting the biggest cuts are the family engagement specialists, which I'm gonna level with you. I'm not 100% certain what they do. As a parent within the district, I can say I have not had a lot of personal interactions with them. My understanding is that they do sort of connect students to programs and are there to try and combat like things like chronic absenteeism and students not feeling a connection to the school and maybe connecting to services that they need. Obviously, the library technicians is another issue. For example, I think the big ones are going to be the middle schools, which are going to transition from having one full-time person to one half-time person. So they'll have much less library access. I don't know. I heard a comment from a parent at this most recent meeting that that's still better than what it used to be, unfortunately, where some of them didn't have library technicians at all. Some of the high schools. I know when I was at Hayward High, I think I almost never went into the library, whether that was because it was closed or because there was my teachers never had a reason to, I'm not sure. But, and then in the next round of the next meeting, they're also talking about cutting, community school specialists. And those are also kind of similar to family engagement specialists in that they're supposed to interface with like the between the school and the community, but also connect students to programs, like support programs, like if they have, they're having housing insecurity or they're having food insecurity, to connect them to those programs. And then also the social emotional support counselors was something that people spoke out a lot about. There was a particular coach at Hayward High who is at risk of having his counselor position cut, and a lot of people spoke out in favor of maintaining his position. So those are the big ones that people have been complaining about, I think.
Yeah, and does it seem like the unions are going to go hard, or is this sort of like at the city level where it's like the damage is already done? There's very little. Now we just negotiate, or are the unions do they have even is there room for negotiation in terms of how the union staff will be impacted by the cuts?
That's a really good question. I
Or union
know,
members, I should say, not staff.
yeah, I know the AOD, the union that represents administrative staff at the district offices. I know they were really pushing this time to not get so many cuts from their unit, but they shouldered a large burden of the cuts last round, probably disproportionate to their size, to be honest, or their impact on the budget. But um, I'm not sure. I know some union representatives have spoken out against it, but I haven't seen anyone come out in colors for it.
Yeah.
So there might not be union appetite for it right now, unfortunately.
Right. Yeah. If I remember correctly, with the city, the union sort of came a little late to the table, and by then the damage was done. Am I misremembering that? Is that kind of how it played out?
It depends on who you ask.
Okay.
The unions have characterized it as they have tried to come up with alternative plans, and those plans were ignored.
Hmm.
Multiple city council members and multiple members of the administrative staff have said that, of the executive team have said that, like, the unions haven't come forward with serious proposals of compromise. So I'm not certain what to believe. I would tend to believe the unions, but I also know that sometimes, for better or worse, the unions don't always have necessarily the full set of information that the executive team has. Like, for
Right.
example, they were initially talking about, like, oh, we can just take more out of Measure C so that way we don't have to cut anybody. And then after they brought that up, the city manager, Jennifer Ott, had to come out and say, like, here's the reason why we can't do that. But again, that's not always clear to everybody who doesn't know all of the ins and outs of how all these bonds work, which is extraordinarily complicated.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, the unions, the union leadership could be learning about it as at the same time that basically the public is learning about it. Is that sort of
Yeah,
fair?
sometimes.
Unless they're getting information, prior to the meeting, but that might be a couple days in advance too, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of it, comes down to the relationship between the bargaining unit and the administration. Just because, you can have, I'm in a union, and from what I understand, our bargaining unit has a pretty good relationship with our administration. And so there haven't been a lot of surprises like that, thankfully. But I think from what I've seen so far, there seems to be, at least recently, a lot more contention, especially around these cuts. And so there might not be that same sort of collaborative effort. And, or like you said, they might be learning things as they go.
Yeah.
They might put forward an idea, and then the administration has to go back and research it and then come back later with a thing. And they're just maybe doing that behind closed doors, or maybe sometimes in public.
Yeah. Well, we'll keep an eye at how this unfolds. It seems like the district and the city, maybe that's where I was trying to remember if the parcel tax is specifically just for HUSD or if it is for funding city services as well.
Yeah. So it's going to be a bunch of different ones. So
Yeah.
like the school district is looking at one, and the school district is obviously extends outside of the city of Hayward borders,
Right.
into the Castro Valley and Cherryland. And that one, they're planning on bringing their own parcel tax. And then the city of Hayward is potentially going to bring another parcel tax in the future. They're still exploring it. Nothing's been set in stone, but that's something that they have, like, on the table. And I think they'd both similarly be short term. They wouldn't be like permanent ones. They'd be for a fixed span of time. The one the school district was looking at was, I think, for 12 years, but they were also entertaining shorter time frames down to even 4 years. And for the city, they were definitely, I know Councilmember Dan Goldstein was saying he was excited about the idea that they could do this as like a potentially short-term, non-permanent fix of, like, we're doing this tax, but only for a certain number of years and then it will expire, just to sort of assuage people's like price scare.
Yeah, because you write up in your article that there, at least from the polling, the numbers aren't there yet. I believe it's a 67% threshold. Is that correct? And they're currently somewhere between, 50% and 65 or so. Is that right? Depending on which tax we're talking about, because I know that you covered a couple different types of taxes. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean it's unfortunately a complicated issue. The ones that for the school district, some of them do make that threshold, but they're the ones that make the least impact. So if they're doing like, I think the one that had the most support, I think it got almost up to 80% from the polling, was only doing it was like less than $100 per parcel for 4 years. So it would only raise like $3 million a year or something like that for 4 years. So you'd only get a total of 12 million out of it, and then it would expire. Whereas like the more it cost and the longer the term, the less people liked it. Right. I think the interesting part was that the per square foot one, which would bring in the most money, and I think is the most equitable, because the larger house you have, the more you pay. Number one, all of these would have exemptions for people who are seniors and having financial hardships. Like that was something that was baked into all the language. But then the ones that are when they brought that one down, even at the most expensive, to a really short term of only 4 years, it became way more popular and almost hit that 67%, even though it would have brought in a ton more money. Yeah. So I think the fear for a lot of other people, for a lot of the people who were polled, was like how long it's going to last.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and I think you sort of mentioned like, is this national politics sort of trickling down to local politics? Is it sort of general like lack of trust around any sort of taxation? Is it, one thing I was sort of thinking about was like, it's interesting that if you think about the California billionaire tax that's being proposed right now, and how it's hard to say whether or not, I think I saw a report that said that the polling wasn't doing great. And I was just surprised by that, right? Because I think then there was the billionaires march that happened in San Francisco, which is insane. Can you imagine that? Anyway, so yeah, I was trying to make sense of, okay, I get the sort of like people being exhausted with like, oh, here's another tax to raise money for a thing that doesn't seem to be improving. It's sort of like, so I can resonate with that. But at the same time, it's like, what is the alternative? If we're not supporting a billionaire tax, right, where we say, let's get let's do a real equitable process where the wealthiest pay their fair share. This is the only other alternative.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one parent at the most recent meeting, because this did not get a lot of actual discussion at this last school board meeting. But the one parent who did call in pointed out, I think, I don't know if this is factually true or not, but it would not surprise me, saying that at least at their school site, the majority of the people who attend the school and the families who attend the school are renters anyway. So they wouldn't actually pay the tax at all. It would be the landlords who would pay the tax. And that, I think, is an important distinction to make into how this actually plays out, is that the people who are most impacted by it are probably also the least likely to be sending their kids to HUSD, if they have kids at all, who are school age. Right. So I think that's also always the weird problem with a parcel tax. I think it is an equitable way of doing it, but there is that sort of conflict of interest where you might have a lot of people who are like, I'm paying this money, but I'm not being benefited by this directly. And then there's a lot of people who are being benefited directly who will actually not be impacted at all. So yeah, I will say that the polling was not representative like, trying to say, oh, we hit the demographics of the city or anything. They did say it was completely random, like who they picked. They picked like 600 people at random. So,
oh, interesting.
um,
Okay. Yeah. Well, the problems with education and funding our education, because this is not just an issue that is in the public school level K through 12, but also universities are struggling with how to stay afloat and how to continue operating with low enrollment. Kind of two different systems there, but still, um, it's something that we doesn't seem like there's a easy fix solution for this, does there, Colin?
and not without intervention at the state level,
Yeah.
because at the end of the day, the issue is that they get paid by the head, and we are not in a baby boom anymore.
Hmm.
Population statewide is declining, and that's just a demographic fact. We can't get around that. So it's a matter of, unfortunately, I think a lot of school districts are across the state are going, if they're not suffering already, they are going to be suffering inside the next 10 to 15 years. And it's whether or not they can convince the state to do anything to overhaul how we fund our K through 12 education.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there's the question. I don't know how I'm curious to see, especially for families with young children, how many people are homeschooling kids, now post COVID, and there's all of these um I think programs that you can enroll your kids in, and I don't know what that looks like in terms of the city of Hayward and how many people are homeschooling their kids compared to pre-COVID. But and not to say that the state should intervene and force families to send their kids to school. I don't know. Maybe, who knows? I don't know. I'm not going to weigh in there, but that'd be one way to solve it.
Yeah, I mean, between homeschooling, charter schools, private schools, all of that poaches enrollment from our standard K through 12 public schools.
Right.
The only thing I can say that my wife brings up pretty regularly is that, like, I think it's Finland outlawed private schools and charter schools because of that particular reason, and that solved a lot of their problems. We obviously are in a lot of ways very different from them, but
Yeah.
I think it might not be a bad thing to consider if the legislature was willing to entertain that idea, which I doubt they are.
Right. Yeah. And there is a former state's or I think current state superintendent running for governor. He has probably very little chance of making it past the primary, but we'll see. Maybe we have a governor that's focused in on education. But
we'll see. He's supposed to be the progressive candidate from the way I've heard things pitched. So
yeah,
we'll see.
There's a little bit of that framing. Yeah. I also did hear, I haven't confirmed this yet, that Gavin Newsom did already endorse Swalwell, but I'm not sure if that's actually true or just rumor. Yeah, I have to look that up. I'm going to look it up right now. But as I'm looking that up, one thing I did want to briefly touch on that maybe fits within the theme of parcel tax, HUSD, and students in Hayward is that there is at least some good news within all of the bad, and or at least somewhat exciting news, right? Is that middle schoolers and high schoolers in Hayward Unified are eligible for the student transit pass. A little bit of good news.
Yeah, that is good news. That is legitimately good news to have all middle schoolers and high schoolers get basically, I think, I don't remember the full details, but I saw it a while ago. Like, I'm pretty sure it's a free transit pass where they can use the buses for free.
Unlimited rides on the AC Transit, youth discounts on BART, and then I think other discounts for regional transit, which is cool, right? It's maybe even long overdue for a lot of bus riders in the city of Hayward.
Yeah, I think that is something that many people would say, that why didn't this happen years ago when we were actually solvent?
All right. Do you want to nerd out for a little bit and talk about ACUs?
Oh, Nestor, I've warned you. We could talk about this forever because it's just it's really it's one of those things where I feel like ACUs are like, in my mind, kind of peak government, where it can have an enormous impact on the city, but it is so wonky and weird and deals with a bunch of stuff that people usually don't think about, that I don't think anyone would possibly be excited about ACUs. But if you are, comment below and let me know, because I would be delighted.
Yeah, please do comment below that. I'd be really curious to know who are the ACU heads in following on over the loudspeaker. For those who aren't familiar with ACUs, they're small commercial units attached to a single family residence, sort of like an ADU, an additional dwelling unit, or accessory dwelling unit. Is it? Yeah, accessory dwelling unit, not additional
Accessory,
dwelling
yeah.
unit. Yeah. Additional always makes more sense in my head because it's like it's an addition, but accessory, fine. So yeah, how would they work in the city of Hayward, Colin? Let us.
So okay, there's a few different ways it could work. I'll start with the way city staff envisions it working. They're envisioning this as a pilot program. They're limiting it to very specific areas. There are two that they talked about. One is the downtown specific plan area, which encompasses more of downtown than you think, more than just like the core. It goes basically from, I think, kind of like Grandish area up to like Second Street, maybe a little beyond, and then from like, over to Foothill, sort of over by where the over by where the Safeway is. Yeah, and Nestor's pulling up the map. It's this area here. They're focusing on that, and also the Mission Boulevard specific plan zone, which is like a block or two on either side of Mission Boulevard, all the way down to South Hayward, like all the way down to the border, basically. So that's the places where they want it to be. And then the way they would really work is they only really function for like single family homes. So if you think in your mind, like, for example, of having like a converted garage, and you would convert it into like, they're envisioning things like coffee shops, bike repair, spot, like, like a nail salon, or like a yoga studio, or a pottery studio, something Julie Roche has brought up multiple times. I think she wants a pottery
Very
studio
on brand, yeah.
And then like they'd serve the neighborhood. So they aren't these things that are going to bring people in from out of town. That's something you can walk to and like really just sort of use that's nearby your house. So they are explicitly saying no to restaurants. They want no sit down, no seating. Even for a cafe, it'll be to go only. Like, you show up, you get your coffee, and you leave. You are not allowed to stay. The idea, they're still thinking that part of the concern is around congestion, specifically around like parking. But again, the critics of that, especially Councilmember Syrup and Planning Commissioner Vasco Yargov, have been basically saying that like that's not what these are supposed to be for. They're supposed to be to like serve food desert areas, like places that lack amenities already. And like, if you're putting them in the downtown specific plan area and along Mission Boulevard, where there's already a bunch of businesses anyway, it's kind of setting them up to fail, because no one's going to open them there. Because why would they compete with, like, you're not going to set up an ACU of a coffee shop around the corner from Snappy's, which has already been there forever and people like go to.
Yeah.
So their vision for it is to like have it be in the Jackson Triangle, which is doing better, but still doesn't have any like real amenities inside that area. It's a lot of it's solid residential only and some parks. That's basically all that's there. So if you had, for example, like a corner coffee shop or a corner store that you could like walk to, that would cut down on car traffic. It would serve the neighborhood that's been really underserved for stuff that doesn't have a grocery store for maybe like, a mile or two in any direction. Could potentially, have a nice little, liven up the atmosphere and get people to stop having to drive halfway across town to get what they need. That's not what staff has pitched. But we'll see how hard some of the council members are willing to go to the mat for it.
And in terms of what staff has pitched, is this under the guidance of a particular person on council, or let's say in leadership? Maybe, I don't know, the mayor?
Well, okay, so this is, as we know, longtime listeners and readers will know that Mayor Mark Salinas does not like unlicensed street vendors. He recently made a distinction in his mind between, like, as he put it, like abuelitas selling tamales out of the back of their car, as opposed to what he characterized as like these elaborate, out of town, almost, the way he describes it always brings to my mind like organized crime level, like operations, where like one person is organizing like 20 different vendors and taking advantage of these laws, which may be happening. I don't know. I haven't investigated it. But if we take him at his word and that this is happening, his concern is not about the abuelita who is like suddenly deciding, oh, instead of having a selling tamales out of the back of my car, I'll have like a little sit down restaurant, like a little bar with like 4 stools, and we'll just like serve people real quick. He's not concerned about that. His alleged concern is around like someone, literally, I think the way he phrased it was like someone coming in and picking 20 houses and saying, okay, you're selling this, you're selling this, you're selling this, you're selling this, and having them all run like illegally. Yeah. Which, again, like in order for these to function and be legal, you would have to meet all the same requirements as a brick and mortar store. You'd have to have a brick and mortar restaurant. You'd have to have the health permits. You'd have to have the food handlers permits. You'd have to get the zoning. Like if you're doing renovations, you'd have to get the building permits and all this other stuff. You'd have to meet all these requirements to be legal anyway. But he still doesn't want it because, and multiple other council members, I think the majority of council basically feels like we haven't gotten a handle on street vendors yet, so we don't want to include food and potentially open up another area of contention. But a lot of it is around like viewing these as indirect conflict with existing brick and mortar restaurants. And so, for example, putting them in the downtown specific area where a lot of restaurants are kind of exacerbates that problem. Yeah. If you're opening an ACU in the Jackson Triangle where there are no restaurants, then you have no competition and you're not hurting anybody. Yeah. So,
but then you wouldn't have people driving to downtown to get their burrito, Collin. You know, they would be getting it from the person down the street. It would be, you know, it'd put the small mom and pop burrito chain out of business.
Yeah, the small mom and pop Metro Taquero that has like 15 locations in Hayward and San Leandro.
In Hayward and San Leandro now, yeah. So it's like, you know, so I mean, on the one hand, I sort of understand, but then on the other hand, it's like there also has to be some incentive for folks to like, you know, like the sort of like risk and reward also, where it's like, if I'm going to risk setting up like this business in my home, you know, like why would I go through this whole process of like permitting and doing all this stuff if at the end of the day, like I don't, I guess the point I'm trying to make is like you're setting up this system, but what incentive is there for folks to start their small business and go through this process anyway if it's already hella complicated? Yeah, I don't know. You know, I'm trying to make sense of like, okay, if not piloting it across town to be like, where is it most effective and efficient?
Yeah.
Then what are you learning through this pilot?
Yeah. I mean, that's my concern. And I think the concern of some others is that like by putting them in these by already hyper limiting them in areas where they kind of don't really make sense anyway, what they probably fear is going to happen is that no one's going to take advantage of it. And they're going to say, well, this doesn't work. And then they're just going to shelve it. Whereas if like you said, you open it up everywhere. Also, the other thing that I think I appreciated Councilmember Cyrus bringing up was viewing it as like sort of a missing middle of business, like commercial rent, right? So for example, he said that he alleged, I don't have proof, but he alleged on the dais that Casa del Toro their rent is $10,000 a month, which is hilarious. Like, that is so high. And a lot of these other commercial businesses, the biggest part of their expense is overhead, just renting the building if they don't own it outright. Like, I know I've spoken to Ignacio, who owns Los Compadres, or is part of that ownership structure, who works there, and he said if we didn't own the building, we would have been out of business ages ago, because the margins are so slim. But most of these restaurants don't own the buildings that they're in, whereas if they're able to then have trial it out, say, hey, I'm getting used to like all this stuff, instead of taking out like a $50,000 loan, you can say, hey, I'm going to start small, build this up, get my cottage food license and this other stuff, and just do it in my garage, and operate out this really tiny business and try it out. And if it fails, sure, it fails, whatever. But at least they're then not $50,000 to $100,000 in the hole.
Right.
And it's like, it's a stepping stone versus like, again, having to take out this enormous loan to even get started and try it out.
Yeah. I guess I'm having a hard time envisioning a scenario where like all of a sudden you have hundreds of restaurants popping up, right, in houses that are producing food at such a level where they're, I don't know, I have a really hard time believing that they will even be able to compete with restaurants that are serving a different clientele, right? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
so it's like if and by the way, if you're going to get a cup of coffee, I'm sorry, you have to sit down. I think the whole appeal of having a cup of coffee, unless you're just needing the cup of coffee and you're on the run, but like a nice little cup of coffee, you sit down for it, you have I can already envision maybe you do a bookstore, coffee shop, garage, like, and not to compete with Books on B, but
more bookstores, the better, man.
Yeah, the more books. Anyway, but you know what I'm saying? Where it's like, I don't envision such a, because I guess the other question I have is, would the additional accessory commercial unit have to be owned by the homeowner, or can it be owned by someone operating in that home? I mean, living in that home. How does that work in terms of operation?
Well, my understanding is, just like with an accessory dwelling unit, you can have tenants. You could conceivably yeah.
And then rent out the space for commercial purposes. I mean, if you're which I'm not, by the way, if you're a proponent of free market capitalism, it sounds like a win-win, like in terms of just like, but I don't know. Don't come to me with your business advice. I only want to see, cute stationery shops and bookstores and microbreweries. So what the hell do I know?
I mean, okay. So one of the things I was just thinking of while we were chatting about this that actually hasn't come up is that if all of these street vendors did move into accessory commercial units and they were spread out around the town, that might actually address one of the biggest complaints that people have with unlicensed street vendors, which is that they set up near existing brick and mortar businesses. So I think the actual thing to address the problem might be to prohibit them prohibit them from the areas they're actually planning on putting them in. Because if you shove them into these residential areas, then they're not competing with those businesses anymore. They're not set up nearby. They're going to be, half a mile plus away, serving very different clientele. And so I think that might actually solve one of the biggest complaints that they have about unlicensed street vendors, which is that they can just set up, I think the limit is 500 feet away from where an existing business is. And that's been a complaint from the person who owns La Casita, for example. They were talking about how their street vendors, a ways away from them, but still on A Street, like just up the street. And, they were saying that was poaching their business. And if that's the case, then having them instead open an ACU somewhere in like the residential area in the middle of like the Burbank area would solve that problem. Then they wouldn't be competing anymore.
I mean, I do see that, like, it seems like the biggest benefit from doing this is to get more, corner stores, grocery stores where you can get, that seems like the just an easy, not an easy fix necessarily, but pilot that would be more interesting, where if you're like piloting micro grocery stores as additional, I keep saying additional accessory commercial units, and you're like, this is specifically for piloting for small grocery stores or small bodega, that would be, I think, that would be an interesting pilot, right?
Yeah.
And you do it in an area that's been sort of looked at or that has been studied as or determined that it's food desert is not the term we use anymore. What's the term of that's food insecure, right? Or but it seems like this is a lot of like, maybe there's not so much debate around it, but we've spent a lot of time already talking about it. Maybe nobody actually even cares about this particular issue, but it does seem like every great city you go to, right, or every like place that you want to be in, it's like, guess what? You can walk to this corner and you can get a drink if you want to drink. And I'm not saying a hard drink. I'm just saying like a beverage, some snacks maybe, or you can get a cup of coffee without going too far, or you can, so it just, I don't know. It seems very limited thinking in terms of just trying something, I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, one of the benefits of like, I live in the downtown area, and that's one of the things I love about it, is that it is for me literally it's a 10-minute walk to get to Buffalo Bills, to get to Books on B, to get to the grocery store, Lucky's, to get to 15 coffee shops. It feels like that is, we settled on a smaller house closer to downtown specifically because it's walkable, and I think that's something, just like you said, that is such a huge benefit that is just not available to the vast majority of people who live in
Right.
Hayward. And this is one way potentially of addressing that and giving that to the folks in these residential areas who honestly kind of deserve it.
Yeah, but we don't want organized crime coming in, Collin, and buying up homes and turning them into sweatshops. No, I don't know. I don't know.
God, think of the tax revenue from flipping homes that quickly. The sales tax on all that would just be enormous. The city would benefit so much.
Okay, this is the last thing we'll nerd out on in regard to ACUs. Is there a square foot limitation? Do you know that off the top of your head? Is there a sort of a limitation to how much of the actual dwelling can be used as a commercial space?
Oh, that's a really good question. I don't know. They probably put it in the ordinance somewhere, but that was not something that came up in discussion, and therefore I don't remember off the top of my head.
I mean, because that's also how you resolve that issue, right? You limit the space in terms of, if you don't want people sitting down, you limit the space, right? The square footage that can be used as the commercial unit. So I don't know. This is, the more I talk about it, the more I get frustrated with, like, it's just like this could be such a cool thing to try out and to pilot. And instead, it feels like it's already kind of doomed to fail. I know you've already expressed that a little bit, but it does feel like it will not work in the downtown area.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really hopeful, because it does show so much promise, and that is just like you said. And even like Councilmember Roche, who is kind of like against having street vendor or having restaurants involved in it, has said that, like, multiple times, that like one of the great things about going to places like even relatively nearby, like Berkeley and some of the smaller residential places in Oakland, is that they do have these corner restaurants, and in San Francisco have these like just little corner restaurants. They seat like 10 or 12 people, and they're like just really nice neighborhood spots that people go to every once in a while when they're feeling like they want to eat out. And we don't have that here. You gotta travel a ways, and that it brings such richness to neighborhoods, and it makes them feel so unique and build their own character and things like that, which is something I'm really interested in, and I know has been something that some council members have expressed interest in, and some city staff have expressed that they want to have more characterful neighborhoods. But I think I worry sometimes that the planner brain of if you've ever played SimCity, you got to have you do your zones and everything. The only thing that builds in there is that stuff in that zone.
Yeah.
And I think that's very much how planners think.
Yeah.
And I worry that it's sort of kind of holding them back from the actual promise of this kind of plan.
Right. Yeah. I spent, what is it? City Skyline is one of those games.
Oh, yeah. City Skylines.
I spend many hours making my little decrepit little town that I end up constructing that being poorly planned. The cool thing about that game is that if you've ever played that game, you can create bike lanes that go up and go down, so you can make tunnels of bike lane tunnels, and you can make bike lane overpasses, and it's just fun. I just like making really elaborate bike lanes. It's a lot of fun. They're not at all practical, but they're so much fun to do in the game. All right, people are probably dead asleep at this point. No, they're excited about all the ACU talk. Collin, do you have anything to plug before we wrap up tonight's episode?
Oh gosh. Oh yeah. I want everybody, all the over the loudspeaker listeners, to mark your calendar for Saturday, March 7th. It hasn't been fully announced yet on Instagram. We'll get flyers and stuff out soon, but just here for the special listeners. On Saturday, March 7th, we're going to be doing our second full-own independent Hayward Voices speaker event. And we're going to have some great people talking about urban agriculture. We have someone from our local community garden. We have someone from the UC Berkeley Agricultural Extension who does the Master Gardeners program. And then also a professor from CSU East Bay, who focuses on urban agriculture. And we're going to talk about the promise and potential of doing urban agriculture in some place like Hayward, and all the sort of different things that can come with it. And maybe everyone will get inspired. So mark your calendars, more announcements coming soon, but just as a little taster teaser for our listeners here on Over the Loudspeaker.
See, I'm ACU pilled now, Collin. All I have is that's all I have in my brain. And I'm like, oh, what if you were to do little garden? Would that count as a accessory commercial unit to have? Anyway,
check agriculture. I think counts differently, but
ag counts different. All right, well, whatever. I don't know what the hell I'm talking about anymore, Collin. Yeah, mark your calendars, Saturday, March 7th. Are we still determining a time on that, Collin?
It should be from, I believe, afternoon, let's say. Okay. I believe it's going to be 3:30 to 5.
Block out your afternoon.
5, somewhere in there.
Come join us at the Hayward Voices speaker series. I'm still writing things on Substack, so if you're interested in reading what I've written, there's a new little article that I did as a follow-up to my December post about some Bay Area Latin American history intersection. So if that's of any interest, you can check that out. But if not, head over to haywardherald.org and read all of the great writing that and local news coverage that you won't get anywhere else.
You won't get it anywhere else.
You won't get it anywhere else. So thanks for tuning in. We'll see you all soon, I think. At least
we'll see you around town.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Collin.
Yeah. Thank you, Nestor.